Sorry. Hello, y'all. We are Team Target ID.
Our game teach you about gun control and the split-second decision that many gun owners encounter.
We do this by putting the player in very difficult situations where you have to think very quickly and act accordingly.
And 1 in 4 Texans owns the guns, and you're very likely to run into people with guns. But well, it's not like you can see it because it's more concealed, and it's not everyone is aware of your safety around people with guns.
In short, this game is about the split-second decisions and thinking before you act.
So the storyline is about you as security guard at a mall. A guy run up to you and cries for help. The bandits have come and they have damaged the light, and then so you come into the mall and try to save as many people as possible.
And to let you understand the game a little bit better, we would like to show you a demo here in the start.
Wow.
Okay, so we have a little tutorial here in the start. You control with the WASD keys. You'll have to touch silhouettes of people. You won't be able to see who they are beforehand because the lights in the mall are blacked out. You have to quickly determine if it is an enemy or a friendly civilian by spotting a gun. Then you'll have to quickly decide to shoot or not to shoot. And you'll only have 3 bullets per encounter. I don't know why there's no sound right now. But here we have our mall setting. The lights are flickering and damaged. And our little character will try and go in an encounter.
Yes. As we enter an encounter, it is random if it's a civilian or if it's an enemy. And to make it more difficult for the player, it's random if what kind of civilian it is or what kind of enemy it is. So it's not the same every time. So, yeah.
If it is a civilian you encounter, you'll just have to let them approach you. Here in this case, Christina accidentally shot a civilian and we lost instantly. It's very difficult in the sense that you cannot make a wrong choice, because in real life, if you do shoot someone, you can't go back.
Yes. Our purpose of the game is to persuade the players to think before they act, so they don't go around doing things before acting, especially with guns. And it does this with training and education. So, yeah.
As you might know, America is filled with guns, so we really want the player to come away with this certainty that they can handle these situations if they do appear. The art and graphics in our game is pixelated. We chose this style just because it's easier for us to express ourselves and what we want to show, and that way we can quickly produce a lot of characters that are both the same, yet each individual of them has a bandit version and a civilian version. So you can't just recognize, oh, this guy is the civilian, so I'll just not shoot him. Everyone has a different version of each. We wanted to both be clear and, in a sense, hidden, so it's not so easy each time. We don't want to portray them as terrorists, as like stereotypical Muslims that many people would think of as terrorists, because that's not the purpose of this game.
Yes, and then we come to programming and gameplay. We made this game in Construct 2. That's the engine, and then we're using the language HTML5, which is the construct that uses. The platform for our game is gonna be PC, and yeah, the encounters. You walk in, you get into the next zone when you touch the silhouette, and that's, as mentioned earlier, it's predetermined when you enter. It's determined when you enter an encounter what kind of enemy it is. So and it's random. There's a lot of random things in the game. What kind of what enemy it is, what kind of enemy it is, or civilian for that sake. You win the game by going through all the silhouettes and getting to the end. The most difficult thing to program was probably making it random, because there's a lot of different civilians, a lot of different bandits that have to show up, and yeah.
Yeah, and sound, we used the sound snap. Mostly, the sounds we took were from sound snap, or some of them are from YouTube too. And what we used to edit the sound was Audacity, was primary. And what we really want was to get the player to get a horror, anxious theme. So it's not about when they play the game. It's not like heavy fun time rocking it at the mall and shoot people. And our target audience is gun owners and future gun owners, so they can learn how to control their weapons and ID people. And why would they play the game is so, as before, that they can learn and about it. And and it's rated T for teen.
So all in all, we think this is a very serious problem that really matters, because from time to time you hear these very horrific news about cop accidentally shooting a civilian because they didn't correctly identify them. This could easily be someone you might know, and it's a horrifying thing to think about, people getting killed for no apparent reason. And now we will have time for questions.
Just a quick comment. I like that you guys chose not to play on stereotypes for criminals. It might be interesting, though, just as like an added layer of the game to start kind of using some of that later. Like, you know, maybe you present someone that stereotypically looks bad but isn't bad, and just something like that, and that sort of split-second decision-making would be interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. It could make it more difficult in a game that, oh, this guy looks really bad, but in reality he isn't. Like, there's a lot of talk about blacks being more criminal, but this isn't necessarily true, and it could also increase the difficulty of the game a lot, because many people associate certain kinds of people with criminals.
So I have just a comment, something that might be interesting for this. When you're trying to measure behavior, what you're really measuring is reaction time. A person will eventually get to the correct decision, but it's how long does it take to get there? So it'd be interesting to see, especially with the racial profiling, you know, the first time you always shot somebody who wasn't of your own race. Then you figured it out and it took you 2 or 3 tries. And the other thing is how fast you figured out, or how long it took you to figure out who had a gun and who didn't. And that's an interesting statistic, so that the person who is playing the game can actually learn about themselves. We as humans always perceive ourselves as awesome, and we're not. So it's great to show people this is what you really are like.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. And this whole game was, in fact, inspired by a shooting range, because it's these quick targets that come up, and some of them you can shoot and some of them you can't. And it's actually way more difficult than what you expect it to be.
So just a question. So right now you have it where a civilian is somebody who doesn't have a gun, and the bandits are people with guns. But have you thought about, like, in Texas, for example, what about a civilian with a concealed gun? Like, how would you determine, like, whether or not they're a threat? Because if you kill them and they're innocent, then you have the same, like, loss condition, you know. But have you thought about that, adding that scenario in your game as well? Because you could open up some interesting ideas for, like, are they pointing the gun at you? Are they threatening? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that people with concealed guns could be also seen as criminals in the game, but in reality isn't. And we try to stray away from that, from with the time we had, because it could confuse the player a lot and be like, oh, he had a gun. Wasn't it the objective to shoot him? So we tried to stray away from that, but it could certainly add a different layer to the game if done correctly, of course.
I remember when you guys were saying who your audience is, you had mentioned gun owners and future gun owners. And one of the issues, obviously, with concealed carry and open carry that we have in the States or in certain places in the States, there are the vigilantes that decide they're going to take the law into their own hands. They're like, oh, I saw something bad happen, so they, shoot somebody. You guys have probably done some research on that, and that's happened recently. Definitely learning that a non-criminal could be carrying a gun around, I think would seriously affect somebody's decision about the certain type of gun control or not gun control that they think is important. So I definitely think that following that, to like its next couple of levels would be something very important. So if your game had, you start off where gun or no gun, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And then later it's like, okay, now we're going to go to a city that has, concealed carry. Okay, now we're going to go to a city that has open carry. So it makes it incredibly difficult. And I think that would make a difference to users, that they would actually see, oh my gosh, this has unintended consequences. So that's something that's eating at me on the inside, and I think that'd be something really good to explore.
I think that's a really amazing suggestion, and it could certainly add a lot more levels and depth to the game that could be developed in the future. Thank you very much.
I was just going to say, I like the simple gameplay that you have, and all the scenarios that you could add to it could really, you could have a lot of education about responsible gun ownership or the dangers of, flying off the handle in a vigilante situation, just within that simple game framework that you have, So I like that a lot. I wanted to let you know that.
Yes, thank you very much. Any other questions? Oh, it seems like we're all out of time, but thank you very much for coming today.